Okay, this is something I forgot to actually say. What pictures I'm gonna put before the other, from which phone, from each phone. I'm gonna go. I'll go Pixel 7a first, and then V60 second, in every single photo. So I don't want to hear how people don't know which photo came from which phone, because I didn't say, because I literally am saying it right now. Pixel first, V60 second. There we go. What's up, y'all? Sparty here. This is video taken from the Pixel 7a. I'm going to be doing a little bit of a photo shoot testing comparison between the 7a and the V60. Now why you may ask, I choose the V60 mainly because they have the same 64 megapixel sensor. I think the one in the Pixel 7a is a little bit wider, and I think it's a little bit larger, to the point like it's so minimal it really doesn't matter. And some test shots, you'll see why. I've taken some in my apartment of my two cats, and there's some very interesting things that the Pixel does with software that I feel kind of makes it to where certain pictures don't look as good as they possibly could in certain aspects. But I'll get into that when I go to those pictures. So yeah. So far though, I do think this is a pretty good system overall. I think my main issue with it is that recording in 4K 60, you can't go to the ultra wide, but also on the V60 in particular, you can only record in 4K 30 on the ultra wide. But at the very least, you can zoom out into the ultra wide and use it, whereas you just can't do that at all on the Pixel 7a here. So that's something that I feel is a little bit wonky and kind of sucks, but it's not the biggest deal in the world. I really don't care. But for those that do care, you just can't do it. And that may suck to you, that may not. So yeah, I'll start taking my pictures and all these other test shots, and I'll get back to you guys. Now this is on the V60, and what I'm going to be doing a obvious compare and contrast here, but the main reason why I think this is a very interesting thing for Google to do, to go with the 64 megapixel sensor rather than just say sticking with the same 12 that they typically would do on the A series phones, is that this gives a pretty good advantage over a lot of other phones on the market, where they decide to go, oh, let's go to the 108 megapixel sensors, or even the 200 megapixel sensors, but then let's pair it with a mediocre chipset that can't really utilize that hardware all that well. And what the Tensor G2 is very nice at doing is giving you giving you a very good amount of leverage over that chip, over what the camera hardware can do. Because there are a lot of phones that still will have these like big booty cameras, but only record at 4K 30. Or if you shoot in the full resolution mode of the camera, which the Pixel doesn't allow you to do, which I don't. Google, make that an option. But when you shoot in the full resolution of the sensor, it may take it'll take a bit longer to process, obviously, because you're working with more information. And what I've really noticed about the V60 in particular is that it's gotten far better at managing that. At first, it would like take a bit, where it'd be like, okay, I gotta chew up more information, so it's gonna take a bit for me to optimize the image. But after like doing it a couple times, it's actually fairly quick. And I wouldn't even necessarily worry about utilizing the full resolution of the sensor all that much on the Pixel 7a, mainly because due to the fact that it's utilizing a 64 megapixel sensor, it's bending down to 16 megapixels. And compared to the 108 megapixel sensors, the 50 megapixel sensors, even on the Pixel 7 and 7 Pro, or the 200 megapixel sensors that you see on other phones as well, you will get in what I've noticed through using phones like the S21 Ultra, which have a 108 megapixel sensor that bends down to 12, or even say a Sony Xperia 1 Mark III, which just has a 12 megapixel main sensor. You can see the detail difference. It's actually pretty crazy, and it's tangible, and it's not just pixel peeping stuff, but it's something that you can see on the main subject of your image quite a bit. Now, the problems with this sensor that I've noticed, I don't know if it's the same sensor that Google is using. I'm fairly certain it's a Samsung sensor. It might be the same one, who knows? But obviously the V60 does have a Samsung sensor. It's basically known. What the improvements that I've seen, and this might also have to do with the software grunt that Google can put behind with their processing and whatnot, is that the ghosting issues and the fringing issues are significantly pulled back, or essentially non-existent. And while on the V60 it wasn't really anything that bothered me all that much, because all I would do is just go into a photo editor and just like fix it as much as possible, and it would basically result in an image that would also be comparable to what the Pixel does. But the key thing is that the Pixel does it without you having to go into a photo editor, so that's nice. There are a couple times where you will see a halo effect around an object, if there's like light clipping or a halo effect or a little bit of haziness, or even like some grain in the background blur of photos still. But compared to the V60, where this was one of the first times this sensor was utilized, it's drastically improved. And that's something that's very nice. That doesn't necessarily mean that I would say it's a full-on win, though, because in the time that I've been spending with the phone, the Pixel 7a, and the pictures in particular that I took of my cats in low light, in situations where there's not a lot of light, I think the V60 still does a far better job at resolving detail and not having to go into the night mode and able to get a picture that has, you know, a good amount of exposure on the subject. Like you'll see it on my black cat where the eye, like, or not even the gray cat, where yeah, I think the Pixel does a bit of a better job with like the fur and the variations in the color on the fur, but then it just blacks out my cat's eyes. Whereas the V60, sure, the difference in the color on the fur is not as much. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a deal breaker, but the eyes aren't completely blackened out. And other things like, I think due to the fact that the camera sensor is also recessed into the phone on the Pixel 7a a little bit more, it is a little bit more difficult to make sure that you get the proper amount of things in focus so that you get the maximum amount of detail out of your photo. But it's not like difficult. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's just something you're gonna have to get used to. What else would I possibly say here? Honestly, I think the Pixel 7a is doing a pretty damn good job at giving you a $500 phone that punches well above its price point in terms of camera features and overall camera hardware. While I wish they did a better job with the ultra wide, I'm basically just not going to use it. I do feel like not having a telephoto sensor is not really that big of a deal because you have this large main sensor anyway that you could 2x crop into and even do a little bit more cropping and not really lose a drastic amount of detail. That's something that's very nice about the V60 too, and something that I'm kind of glad these phones that are coming out that are cheaper are doing, because they're like, we'll just give you a large sensor and you can just crop from the main sensor and you'll get as good, if not in some cases a slightly better photo than compared to if they just put like some rinky dink ass 12 megapixel camera, telephoto camera on the back of the phone. So yeah, overall though, I'll talk about the camera more. I'll put out more dedicated, pictures and show you guys what pictures look like in, say, the community tab and whatnot. But so far, does it unseat the V60? Not really, which is actually pretty crazy, because that really just means the V60 is like still a very good contender for a lot of things. If you want to use a maximum amount of detail on the sensor and all this other stuff, the V60 will be your phone to go with. But if you don't really care about that, I don't see why getting a Pixel 7a would be a bad thing at all. But yeah, that's all I really want to say for this. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys feel. This is Sparta. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the support. Have a good one.